Here's why Ozzy Osbourne gifted a 200K Harley-Davidson to the Hells Angels leader. Picture this. The Nevada desert doesn't whisper, it growls. Like God himself scorched the earth and left it to bake under a merciless sun, heat waves dance like spirits lost between worlds. Wind carries dust like secrets never meant to be spoken. And cutting through that wasteland, 15 roaring Harley-Davidsons, engines pounding like war drums, chrome fangs glinting under burning daylight. 15 men, 15 lives forged in asphalt, steel, leather, blood, and loyalty. At the front, Tank Jackson, 6'3". 280 of muscle carved by miles and fights. Tattoo sleeves like history books nobody else could read. Eyes sharp as desert wolves, but heavy with memories only old warriors carry. Born to ride scorched into one arm. An eagle and American flag on the other were worn like armor. And today his face held something even rarer than respect among bikers. Confusion. And quiet fear, because Tank had no clue why he was here. 3 days ago, a phone call shook a man who never shook. "Tank mate, I've got a proposition for you." That voice, rough like whiskey, British Birmingham bite, yet warm with the kind of pain only legends hide. Ozzy Osbourne. Not just a name, a storm. Most men would collapse under fame like his. But legends, they drown in silence long before applause fades. Tank's crew didn't know who they were riding toward, didn't know what treasure waited in dust and steel ahead, didn't know this ride would become the most sacred memory of their lives. They only knew Tank had said, "Everyone follow me." This ain't an ordinary meeting. No explanation, no questions asked. Brotherhood doesn't need details, only direction. The desert howled. Engines thundered. And destiny waited beyond the horizon. Before we dive deeper, if you love untold biker legends and dark emotional sagas, hit subscribe to Voices of Darkness, tap like, and share with your brothers, because stories like these don't die. They ride forever. 3 nights ago, Tank sat alone in the dim Hells Angels clubhouse. Old Harley photographs lined the wall. Yellow corners, oil stains, ghosts smiling through time. His father, George Jackson. Strong hands stained with grease. A man who believed engines had souls and loyalty was sacred. Son, a road tests men. A motor reveals them. His father's voice echoed like steel in Tank's chest. It was the anniversary of his death. The kind of night whiskey doesn't fix, it only remembers with you. Tank's phone buzzed. Private line. Only 5 men alive knew that number. He answered slow, holding his breath like instinct told him history was calling. "Tank, this is Ozzy Osbourne. We met in Arizona. Remember?" Tank froze. Not because it was Ozzy, but because of how he sounded. Fragile. Like an old lion remembering his roar but fearing silence. Of course Tank remembered. A night under Route 66 stars. Ozzy sitting by his car, head in hands broken by love, fame, and life. No cameras. No applause. Just a man lost in a world that never lets legends rest. And Tank did what his father taught him. Help a man on the road. Doesn't matter his name. Only his need. They took Ozzy in. Fed him. Listened. Laughed. Heard rock history and childhood pain in the same breath. And when Ozzy left that morning, he looked Tank in the eyes and whispered, "Real friends are rare. You don't forget men like you." Now here Tank was, riding into a desert with brothers behind him and fate ahead. GPS stopped. Dust settled. The bikes came to a silent crawl before a weather-beaten sign. Desert Dreams Motorcycle Museum, Old Wood. Bullet holes. History and ghosts inside. Out stepped an elderly man, beard long as road miles, hat pulled low like secrets. "You must be Tank Jackson," he said. "Mr. Osbourne's waiting. Says today is history." Tank's heart hammered. History? No, something deeper. Legacy. And inside that museum, shining under spotlight like a holy relic of thunder and chrome, waited the motorcycle that would change everything. But not before Tank faced memories he thought he'd buried, and a gift no biker in history had ever received. The museum doors sighed open, and cool oil-scented air met the desert heat like 2 old rivals shaking hands. Light spilled across concrete, across rows of motorcycles that looked less like machines and more like saints, each with a plaque where a halo should be. And in the center of it all, in faded jeans and a black tee that had known 1,000 arenas, stood Ozzy. He didn't wave first. He waited as if asking permission to step into their house even though this was his stage. Tank crossed the room in a few long strides, and Ozzy's smile, lopsided, weary, completely human, broke the last of the distance. "Tank mate," Ozzy said, voice gravelly and bright at the edges. "You brought the cavalry." "Brought the family," Tank corrected, pulling him into a quick, firm hug. Leather against cotton. Road against record. Razor, Snake, Bull, and the rest gave nods like benedictions. Even hard men show reverence when something true steps into the room. "You look better," Tank said. Ozzy chuckled. "Sharon threatened me with salad. I surrendered." Laughter ricocheted off the steel and glass. The museum's owner, George, desert-bearded and sun-creased, clicked the doors closed and shepherded them deeper. Ozzy's eyes twinkled. "Before we get sentimental, Tank mate, let's get sacred." He turned, lifted a hand, and the lights above the far platform brightened a shade. Like a chorus taking a breath. There it was, chrome like a second sunrise. Lines so clean they made the air feel crooked. A body of silver and black that could have rolled straight from a 1936 afternoon into this morning without aging a heartbeat. "Knucklehead," Snake whispered, as if a name could kneel. Tank didn't move. Didn't speak. The first blink he allowed himself felt like drinking water after a dry mile. He took 2 steps, then 3, then he stopped at the edge of the platform, hands down at his sides, fingers flexing like they recognized home before the mind did. He read the tank badge. He traced the contour of the rocker boxes with his eyes. He saw the handmade saddle, stitched as if a single craftsman had sung while he worked, and he felt something ancient wake up inside him. "Ozzy," Tank said finally, voice unsteady. "What is this?" "History," Ozzy said. "And repayment." George stepped forward, hat in hands. "She runs. Properly. Every gasket honest, every bolt era correct. We hunted parts like coyotes hunt shade. 3 years. Mr. Osbourne nearly slept in the workshop." Ozzy shrugged. Man needs a hobby when he's not being shouted at by 40,000 people. Tank circled slow. He wasn't just looking, he was listening. To the promise in the chain, the discipline in the spokes, the quiet in the timing chest that only speaks once the engine's hot. His father had taught him how to listen to a machine the way priests listen to confession. Nothing gets forgiven without truth. On the left down tube, nearly hidden, a whisper of engraving. Robert Tank Jackson, Los Angeles. Tank's jaw tightened. He didn't touch it. Touching would make it real too fast. "You called me to see this?" he asked. Ozzy shook his head. "I called you to take it home." The room held its breath. Somewhere metal ticked as it cooled. Outside, the wind threw sand against the glass and failed to be louder than that one sentence. Bull spoke first, voice respectful. "Mr. Osbourne, with all due—" "Ozzy," the singer cut in gently. "Ozzy," Bull corrected. That's too much." Ozzy looked right past the muscle and into the man. "You have any idea what Tank did for me that night in Arizona?" He didn't wait for an answer. "He reminded me I was human. I'd forgotten." Razor shifted, discomfort becoming gratitude, gratitude becoming silence. "Some gifts you only honor by shutting up." "George," Ozzy said, "show them her bones." George walked them like a ranger through a cathedral. "This is a 36E early knuckle," he said, patting the rear fender like you'd pat a calm horse. 61 cubic inches, about 40 horses if she's in a good mood. Linkered carb. Mechanical advance. Dreisamplube. Firestone period correct skins. Snake crouched, eyes devouring machining marks, bracket welds, fastener heads. These screws aren't repro retail, they're aged. Hand finished. "Found a jar in a dead man's barn," George said softly. "Fairfield County." His grandson didn't even know what they were. Tank leaned close to the cases, seeing his reflection split by the knuckles on the rocker boxes, those lumpy crowns that named a dynasty. He smelled linseed and leather, old steel and new oil. He remembered being 10, hiding under his father's bench while a panhead coughed itself awake. The whole garage trembling like a drum skin. It's not the noise that tells you. It's the tone, his father had told him. Tone never lies. "They used to say," George continued, "that this engine wanted to be ridden more than it wanted to be looked at. Most old iron prefers that." "Me too," Ozzy quipped. "I get dull if you put me behind glass." Snake chuckled, then squinted. "Timing marks are perfect." "Who set them?" George smiled. I did. Twice. Mr. Osbourne checked them thrice. Ozzy lifted both hands in innocent surrender. What? I was excited. Tank reached for the clutch lever and stopped short of contact. He had the sudden, irrational fear that if he touched it, the thing would vanish like a dream. Go on, Ozzy said, voice gone soft. She's yours. Touching is how you tell the truth from the fantasy. Tank's fingers closed around the lever. Stiction then glide, waited just so. The language of a machine that had been taught its own name. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he wasn't in a museum anymore. The memory didn't ask permission. It blew in with the smell of summer tar and wild onions, with the thump of a V-twin echoing off cinder block. Little Robert, Tank before he earned it, stood on a wooden crate beside his father. George Jackson's hands were gentle even when they were rough. He guided the boy's fingers to the rocker clearances. Feel that? George said. Just a whisper loose. Engines like to sing, not choke. Why not make it tight? The boy asked. Because tight is fear, loose is faith. They adjusted, and the old Sportster coughed awake, coughing becoming cadence, cadence becoming a heartbeat that made the window glass trill in their frames. Neighbors complained. George waved and turned the throttle just a hair, apologizing in a language only one or two men on the block understood. Later that year, after the accident, the garage turned too quiet. The crate was still there. The wrenches were still in their drawer. But the song was gone. And then one evening, teenage Robert unlocked the door and sat on the floor with the Sportster, just to be in the same room with the thing that made the world make sense. He watched dust cross the last beam of sun and thought, I will live where engines live, and I will not forget what they teach me. 38 years later, a knucklehead pressed that promise like a seal on paper. Tank released the clutch lever and came back to himself. Thank you, he said. The words were small compared to the thing he felt, but a man has to start somewhere. Ozzy clapped once. It echoed like a starter pole catching. Right then. Time for the boring bit, paperwork. George fetched a thick envelope. It looked like a dossier for a spy plane. Provenance summary. Work logs, parts sources. Maintenance Bible. I wrote it in pencil and pen both because one day some grandson will hate me for not choosing. Insurance certificate. 5-year warranty. If anything sneezes, you ring me. I'll bring the trailer, Snake said automatically. George shook his head. You'll bring your riding jacket. Machines hate trailers. We'll tune her for the road. She wants to go home the way God meant, under her own power. Ozzy leaned on the platform railing. There's one condition. Every eye turned, it doesn't live in a dark back room. It lives where your people see it. Where kids who don't know a pushrod from a pogo stick can stare and feel the tickle of wonder in their ribs. Right in the center of your clubhouse, spotlight, story placard. Not because of me, he stabbed a thumb at his chest. Because of you. Because of that night and what it reminded me of. Done, Tank said instantly. No committee, no vote. Command decisions are easy when they're right. George nodded toward a covered shape near the wall. Ozzy snapped his fingers, grin turning boyish. Show him, George. The cloth came away. A display base of brushed steel and glass, edges radiused, seams invisible. The kind of craftsmanship that makes architects curse and machinists pray. Within the front panel, etched in the faintest ghost of lettering, Mercy rides farther than pride. Razor read it aloud and swallowed hard. Thought you might want something to say what you can't always say. Ozzy said gently. Tank ran his thumb along the etched words, then looked up. His voice rasped. You've thought of everything. Ozzy shrugged. I've had time. Also, I'm obsessive. The museum doors whispered, and a ribbon of hotter air lit the bikes with desert shimmer. Afternoon had bent toward evening. Shadows grew honest. George rolled the knucklehead down from the plinth like he was lowering a crown. Let's light her. Snake moved on instinct, fuel on, petcock open, tickle the linkered, ignition to retard. Razor braced the stand. Bull hovered with that comical tenderness big men get around small, precious things. Tank took the kicker. Boot found peg. He felt the motor say, now. He brought it down. Compression. Return. Second stroke. Life. The room filled with a sentence older than anybody present. It wasn't loud. It was true. A loping cadence, a baritone pulse that vibrated the welds in the building and rearranged the breathing in men's chests. Snake put a hand on the rocker box. Razor closed his eyes. George smiled like old wood catching fire. Ozzy laughed from his belly, pure, surprised, a sound that could have come from a pub at midnight or a church on Sunday. Tank feathered the throttle. The engine answered with patience and promise. "Take her out," George said. "Let the desert learn her name again." They rolled the doors wide and the heat stepped in like a dare. Tank swung a leg over, a movement he had done 10,000 times on 100 bikes, and this one made him 19 again. Broken certain, he nodded once to Ozzy. Ozzy returned it. "Eyes bright. Tank," he called over the idle. "Tell Sharon later I did a sensible thing today." "I'll tell her you did a holy one," Tank said, and fed the clutch. The knucklehead moved, not like a museum piece escaping, not like an old lion limping out of a cage, like a promise kept. It tracked straight, shifted clean, click, 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 like a typewriter writing a poem only 2 people know how to read. The museum steps and glass front slid past. The desert took him into its mouth and tasted old steel, found it familiar, let it pass. The Nevada heat softened as the sun dipped low, turning the sky into a burning canvas of gold and blood orange. Tank eased the knucklehead onto open desert road, and the old V-twin answered like a war drum waking from a long sleep. Thump, 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 thump. Whum, whum, whum. That sound wasn't noise, and it was memory wearing chrome. Behind him, 15 Harleys rolled out like a steel cavalry, engines matching pulse beats, shadows stretching long across desert gravel. Razor looked like he was witnessing a resurrection. Snake muttered a prayer only mechanics understand. Bull wiped his eyes and blamed the sand. Even the wind slowed down to listen. Tank shifted into third and then fourth. And the old machine didn't just run. It sang. The exhaust had that ancient Harley timbre. Raw, honest, a little wild. Like a blues guitar dipped in gasoline. Ozzy followed behind in a dusty Toyota, smiling like a man watching a childhood dream he never had found shape in the world anyway. When Tank hit cruising speed, he didn't feel 52. He felt free, young, unbroken. For a moment, his father was riding beside him, 1964 Sportster glinting in the corner of his eye, calloused hand tapping a Tank in approval. "I told you, son. Engines remember love." Tank blinked, but didn't slow down. Legends don't cry at the handlebars. They let the road carry the tears away. The convoy rode into sunset like kings returning to a kingdom forged in steel and loyalty. And as twilight claimed the desert, the knucklehead kept beating, proud, ancient, eternal, like America itself breathing through time. Night. Los Angeles lights like diamonds crushed across black velvet. The Hells Angels clubhouse. Steel door, red glow, history in brick and smoke. When Tank rolled in, the whole parking lot froze. Men who'd seen wars, prison yards, funerals, heartbreak, fell silent. The knucklehead idled like thunder in a church. Someone whispered hoarse, "No way. Is that 1936? Tank killed the engine." Silence hurt the ears. "Brother," a young, patched member breathed. "Where did you find that?" Tank put a hand on the tank badge, thumb tracing his engraved. "Name Ozzy Osbourne gave it to me," gasps, disbelief, respect. Then, the doors swung open, and Ozzy walked in like a wandering king returning from exile. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in reverent shock. "Ozzy!" "No fucking way." They surrounded him, not as fans, but as men welcoming a brother. Ozzy grinned. "Be honest, lads. You didn't expect the Prince of Darkness to walk into a biker clubhouse and deliver holy scripture on 2 wheels, did ya?" Laughter shook the walls. Beer bottles cracked open. Arms clapped backs. Music swelled. Not rock, but old blues humming through speakers like ghosts of juke joints past. Tank rolled the knucklehead into the center. Lights hit chrome. Voices died. Razor raised a glass. To Tank, to Ozzy, and to the steel that carries souls farther than legs ever could, they drank. They toasted. They lived. That night wasn't about fame, music, clubs, or power. It was about men remembering they are human, and humans remembering they are brothers. Past midnight. Backyard of the clubhouse. Crickets singing back up to distant highway hum. Tank and Ozzy sat on old crates, beers in hand, city lights flickering below like a tired constellation. No cameras. No crowd, just 2 men who had survived themselves. Ozzy exhaled slow. "You know, Tank mate, People think success saves you. Most days it just builds a bigger room for loneliness to echo in. Tank nodded. I thought being strong was about not needing help. Ozzy shook his head. Strong is when you accept it. Silence. Not awkward. Sacred. Tank stared at his bike through the open door. Steel glowed under soft yellow light like a relic of a pure time. My father would have loved to see that, Tank whispered. Ozzy rested a hand on Tank's shoulder. He saw it, mate. Somewhere we don't understand yet. He saw it. Tank swallowed hard. You ever been scared, Ozzy? Ozzy laughed. Tired and honest. I've walked on stage in front of 80,000 people and felt nothing. Nothing is scarier than feeling nothing. Tank looked at him, not as a rock icon, but as a wounded soldier who fought his battles in arenas instead of streets. We saved each other that night, Tank said. Ozzy looked up at the stars. I and the universe paid attention. Before you go, Ozzy said, reaching into his jacket, there's one more thing. He handed Tank a thick envelope. Not money, not documents. Something heavier. Open it at home. Tank raised a brow. Ozzy, what else could you possibly... Just do it, and don't cry at the first page. Cry at the third. It's more dramatic. They laughed. The kind of laugh men share when they respect each other's scars. Ozzy stood. You gave me a place to break without being broken. Tank, friendship like that. Rare as a 36 knucklehead, they shook hands. Not like acquaintances. Like warriors who had shared a battlefield most people never see. Tank didn't open the envelope that night. He couldn't. Some gifts you don't rush. Some moments are temples, and you don't enter a temple with dirty boots and loud thoughts. He waited until dawn, when the clubhouse was quiet. When engines slept like tired lions, when only the soft hum of Los Angeles breathing filled the world. He sat at the scarred wooden table where deals had been made, fights settled, and toasts given to fallen brothers. He laid the envelope down, stared at it. A warrior suddenly unsure how to hold a feather, his hands and the same hands that rebuilt, carbs in motel parking lots and fought their way out of bars in 4 different states, trembled. He opened. It's slow, careful, like it might bleed. Inside, the first thing he saw was a photograph, black and white. Faded edges. Elvis Presley astride his 1936 knucklehead, hair perfect, eyes burning like a man who had the world but still felt the weight of it. Tank smiled, then flipped it over. On the back, Ozzy had written, True kings recognize true kings. Ride free, brother. Ozzy Tank's chest tightened. He placed the photo down like it might crack under gravity. The next page was thicker. Parchment. Not paper. Handwritten. Ink strokes heavy like they carried emotion in their backs. It was a letter. Tank began to read slowly. More breath than voice, Tank. There are men who ride motorcycles, and there are men who carry their soul inside one. You are the second kind. The night you found me in Arizona, I wasn't Ozzy Osbourne. I wasn't a rock legend. I was a lost old bloke sitting in his own shadow, and you didn't save Ozzy. You saved the man under the leather and scars. You reminded me of something I forgot. Brotherhood isn't earned by music or miles. It's earned by heart. Your father raised a warrior, a gentle one, the rarest kind. That motorcycle isn't payment. It's respect. It's gratitude. It's legacy. Take care of it like you take care of your brothers. Ride free, tank mate. And if you ever feel lost, follow the sound of your engine back to yourself. Ozzy, by the end. Tank's face wasn't stone anymore. That letter didn't break him, it freed him. A tear fell, heavy, silent, onto the wood. It soaked in like the table had seen 1,000 secrets and was honored to hold one more. Tank inhaled, long, deep. He placed the letter down and exhaled a lifetime he didn't know he'd been carrying. There was one more sheet, short, handwritten, different ink, darker, older, a poem. At the top, in shaky script, for George Jackson, a man I never met, but feel like I knew because his son carries his fire. Tank's breath hitched. He read, Old Hands and Young Roads, by Ozzy Osbourne. Some men teach with words, others with miles. Some build kingdoms, others build riders. Grease under the nails, truth in the eyes, and a heart made of road dust and forgiveness. He didn't give you wings. Tank. He gave you wheels. And there is no higher gift. Tank closed his eyes. He didn't wipe his tears. Men like him don't hide emotion in private. They honor it. He whispered like a prayer. "Thanks, Dad." And in that dawn glow between sleeping engines and rising sun, it felt like his father answered through the rumble of the city below. Tank folded the pages back into the envelope, gentle as laying a friend to rest. He stood, walked outside, and looked at the knucklehead resting under soft yellow light. Chrome reflected morning gold. Leather breathed history. Steel dreamed. He put a hand on the tank. Warm, even without running, as if the machine had a pulse now. As if it remembered where it came from, and who it belonged to next. His crew slowly filtered out, yawning, laughing, rubbing eyes. Razor paused when he saw Tank. "You good, brother?" Tank nodded, stronger than he'd ever felt. "I'm more than good." Snake smirked. "That bite completes the clubhouse. Like a crown fits a king." Tank didn't smile big. Men like him smile with their eyes. But that morning, his eyes smiled like sunrise on chrome. They moved the knucklehead into the custom glass stand. Polished steel, spotlight kissing history, engraving glowing faint, Mercy rides. Farther than pride, Tank placed the photo and poem in a sealed frame beside it. He spoke quietly, not to the room, but to the universe. "I'll write it. Not every day, but enough that it never forgets what it is." He ran his fingers across the handlebar. "And I'll never forget what made me who I am." His brothers stood behind him, silent like soldiers in ceremony. Razor lifted a beer. Snake placed a hand on Tank's shoulder. Bull whispered, voice rough, "To fathers, to brothers, to the ones who don't ride with us and the ones who do." And they all answered together, like a prayer of gasoline and loyalty. "Ride forever." The camera would fade here, music low, something bluesy. Dusty, road-worn, voice calm, gravel soft. Some legends wear crowns, some wear leather, and some ride machines older than their scars. But the rarest legends are men who remember kindness long after the world forgets them. Ozzy didn't just give a motorcycle, he gave honor. He gave memory strength to breathe another lifetime, and Tank didn't just receive a gift. He carried forward a legacy built not on fame, but on loyalty, heart, and brotherhood. Now prove you love real legends, if this story touched your heart. If brotherhood means something to you, if engines and loyalty live in your soul, subscribe to Voices of Darkness right now. Hit like. Share the story with someone who rides life with you. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Not for fame, but for the brotherhood. Comment below. Ride free forever. And always remember, steel rusts. Rubber burns, but brotherhood never dies.